Hello, it is time for the first lecture that is focused on just one module of our class. And this is the week when we discuss corporate capitalism in the late 19th century through the writing of a guy named Andrew Carnegie. You might have heard about him. He was one of the original robber barons, the rich in the 19th century that held monopolies in their field of industry. Carnegie is one of those people. He monopolized the steel industry. And if you're not familiar with the terminology, a monopoly is a board game. No, it's actually when somebody has all the supply wrapped up in one hand. So all the steel mills, very few exceptions, belonged to Carnegie, to the US Steel Corporation. So he was able to set prices. And moreover, he was also practicing a vertical integration, meaning that from the coal, iron, limestone quarries, etc., onward, all the way, so all the raw materials into the steel mills were in Carnegie's hands. The distribution networks were in his hands. And in the towns that he built around his steel mills, which he plunked down out in the middle of nowhere, depending on where we could get the input to the place easily, transportation, geography, that is. And he built the cities to go with the steel mill for the workers from scratch, and he owned everything in them. The houses, so you paid rent to Carnegie if you worked for him, the schools, the churches, the grocery stores. So before you even got your first paycheck, you were already in debt to your employer because you paid rent, you bought groceries, and your entire paycheck or more. Many people ended up owing money to Carnegie and others who ran these company towns. George Pullman is another example. We will talk about him next week and beyond that. So if you know that that old folk song, 50 tons, or is it, no, 16 tons, sorry. Another day older and deeper in debt, I owe my soul to the company store. That is precisely about that, about somebody who is a member of the working class, who works for wages, and is entirely dependent on his needs, for his needs on his employer, who owns everything. And of course, they charge you extra because they are the only ones you can buy groceries from. So it is calculated to put people in debt for the privilege of working for this company and in debt to your employer. Perfectly legal, of course, and people were desperate enough to sign up for it. So as you might have noticed, there's a wall of text greeting you here. The reason for that is that the lighting right now is pretty poor, so I can't actually show my face. Literally, you can't see it. But I also wanted to give you a view behind the curtain. Here I have my lecture template. So when I don't give a big lecture where I introduce the subject, where I talk about more than just the text, this is going to be my template. I'm going to introduce the text that required reading, the assigned reading to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about that worksheet that you're going to complete. And as you see here, the worksheet, the questions that you're answering as you read this text are listed here. So when I give you these types of lectures, first I want to establish what is the subject. And if you've already seen my overview lecture for modules 2 through 5, we're talking about inequality. American society is enormously uneven. The distribution of wealth, everything swims up to the top. You have a handful of extremely rich, filthy rich individuals, and you have a whole lot of people who are not able to meet their basic needs: housing, healthcare, never mind retirement. And the people who are discussing social policy, politics in these first 4 assigned readings, in the first 4 weeks, all speak to that issue of inequality. Carnegie is special in the sense that he is a big fan of inequality. Not merely because he's saying it works for me, I'm the richest guy on the planet, richer than God, but rather because I can argue that it is in everybody's benefit, even the poor who are too stupid to realize it, or perhaps because the socialists keep telling them that they can do better and should do better. The labor movement keeps telling them that, well, if they only knew that in fact they are better off in the long term because of this inequality, that it is in their interest to be at the bottom of the pecking order. If the person who is, to exaggerate slightly, who is starving to death because he's unemployed and there is no social safety net, would just think with his dying thought, well, I'm glad that some people can build temples and museums and commission great works of art, go to the opera. Wasn't it worth it for me to die miserably in a ditch? If only people could realize that, society would be just fine. It is just a matter of perception. People are displeased. People are cranky. They like to complain. So rather than take their lot in stride and deal with the fact that they are at the bottom of the rungs, they always think they can do better. If they got that out of their head, if they only got with the program, it would be for the greater good. And this is inspired by a school of thought that we call social Darwinism. And I hope to get into more detail with that when we discuss the work of the first group that is presenting this. But briefly, social Darwinism is the application and misappropriation of a theory developed in the field of biology, a science that emerged in the mid-19th century and developed chiefly by a guy whose name was Charles Darwin, who might have heard about him as the person who discovered that species develop through evolution. Now, one of the often heard phrases from the work of Charles Darwin is that the notion of the survival of the fittest. And this is part of his language, certainly. In the context of his work, survival of the fittest, the fitness here is not about strength or bruteness or violence or ruthlessness. The fit in the survival of the fittest is more like the phrase you might like to hear one day when you have a job interview and somebody tells you, we think you are a good fit for the position. You have the right skill set, you have the right attitude, and you will fit right in. So in Darwin's thinking, a species that is smart, that is cooperative, that is adaptable, is going to thrive. It has nothing to do, not primarily at least, with strength or whatnot. Now, social Darwinism misunderstands, perhaps deliberately, this phrase of the survival of the fittest and reads it to mean that in the animal kingdom and in the world of nature, the strongest survive because they dominate the weak, and that is their right. And therefore, everything in the history of human institutions and culture, that whole Christian idea that weakness is a virtue, that everybody is equal, which is strongly revived as a notion during the age of revolution, democracy, republican government, and so forth. This whole idea of equality is a sham. If you truly realize how nature works, if you study your biology, you understand that with men as with animals, the strong survive, and in spite of religion, in spite of law, they have every right to dominate the weak and to impose their will on them. And this is the ideology that fits with the society that people like Carnegie have built. It is an ideology of legitimization. It is a set of ideas people think up to justify why they have a right, nay, a duty, to be ruthless, to do the things that they do, and to do those things to others. So if you're approaching this reading and you're reading the questions, like what is the relationship between society and the individual, don't think about it as the question asking what is the relationship between society and the individual, because it isn't asking that. It's asking what does Carnegie suggest. And regardless of recent ideological changes in this country, where in essentialist ideas of race and social Darwinism have become much more thinkable, and you can say those things again about the inferiority of other races and people and so forth. For the vast majority of Americans and for the vast majority of you as students, who thankfully belong to a generation where equality is not a dirty word, but where you assume that, yes, of course, people are equal regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and so forth. If you read somebody who's celebrating inequality, who's dismissing whole groups of people as inferior, you might find that hard to believe. You might find yourself thinking, oh, he can't possibly be saying that. So keep that in mind. Yes, he is indeed saying just that. And he's one in a long line of tradition of people who say just that, who say, yes, there's a white master race, in so many words, who are at the top of the pecking order, not by accident, not because they stumbled into this role because of a sequence of historical events, not because of their ruthless abuse of power and technological means, but because it is their right. And it is their right because of their inherent superiority, and that is a function of their genetic makeup, of their biology, and so forth. So, but Carnegie is one of those people. And that's why we need to read people like him so that we understand the full extent of that line of thinking that is now once again so influential. So as you've seen, if you followed along, I've followed my template here. With the next couple of lectures, I hope I'll fix my lighting situation so I can actually talk to you face to face, as it were, or face to screen. But now I wanted to show you the, the inside view, the machinery. This is how I approach the talk that introduces the text. So with that said, please go and do your worksheet now. And the deadline for that is Wednesday at noon, after which I would ask you to view the presentation that a group of students who signed up for that week will have posted on Blackboard. And then after that, everybody should get into the discussion forum and contribute to the discussion, critique your peers' presentation, read and respond to each other's comments. Do everybody the courtesy of reading what they write. If we were sitting in a classroom together, you would hear them. This is different but online, so you need to read everything that people write to get your full money's worth of an educational experience. So with that, I'm signing off and I'll let you get back to work. Goodbye.